We keep hearing about the notion of data-driven policies and actions. However, what that usually means is that someone has devised a metric or a target that's supposed to respond to the world. However, targets and metrics generally don't capture all the complexity of a system. In particular, targets often limit our ability to see the interdependencies inherent in any complex system. There is a famous story about these interdependencies regarding cobras in India. The British wanted to reduce the number of cobras in India. To do this, people were rewarded for every dead cobra they brought in an effort to reduce the total number of snakes. As you can imagine, rewarding people for every dead snake simply meant that snakes were bred so that they could be killed and brought in for a reward. As long as the cost of breeding and killing one extra snake was lower than the extra reward for one more snake, it would continue to happen. Therefore, the total population of snakes might actually go up. Let's think about this in greater detail. For simplicity, assume that before the intervention, the population of cobras was purely determined by existing natural causes. Encountering a cobra was a totally random process. The actual size of a cobra population is unknown. But the thinking is, the smaller the population, the lower the chance of a human bumping into a single cobra. Currently, there is a causal chain between the population and the number of cobras caught. So by influencing the middle component, we should be able to shrink down the population tomorrow or in the next period. Now, introducing a reward based on catching cobras would induce two effects. The first is that people would actively seek out cobras. With a fixed population, accelerating the rate at which you bump into a cobra should reduce the population. This is the behavior we want to induce because it should lower the population we care about. However, recall that we are not directly observing the cobra population. We are instead using a metric to proxy for the population measurement, which would be impossible to count. This mismatch between the desired outcome, a lower population, and the target, cobras caught today, introduces an opportunity to manipulate the target. This will definitely happen if the cost of manipulating the target is lower than actually hitting the target through honest means. I.e., if it's relatively cheap to breed snakes, then people will manipulate the target. This was precisely the situation in India. The benefit a catcher gets is the monetary reward net of the cost of effort. Breeding the snakes was much easier than actually hunting wild cobras. People hit the target, and in the absence of correct measurement of the population, they could escape scrutiny. The authorities, however, could only see more snakes arriving, and therefore could only believe that the population would shrink faster than ever. However, the population of snakes was, of course, increasing. They didn't realize that they were observing a new source of cobras, and their data stream had been changed from the natural order to a new, manipulated one. This example, the Cobra effect, is usually connected with an adage called Goodhart's law, which states that when you have a statistic that is a useful measure, it tends to collapse in usefulness once it's used for quality control. It was initially used purely in a statistical sense. The anthropologist Marilyn Strathern generalized it to include evaluation more broadly. In her words, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. In light of our Cobra example, we can refine this perspective. A target should work well if the metric is hard to manipulate via dishonest means, we can measure the outcome we care about directly, and the metric is related to the outcome we care about. Economists have devised a similar law known as the Lucas critique. It says that historical data cannot be directly used for decisions that influence the future. The idea is that the historical data from one state of the world cannot be used for another. When we intervene, we change the state of the world, and therefore the old data will no longer reflect the new state. This is similar to what happened with our Cobra example. Let's think about this example. Consider the decision on how much security to have in a retail bank. The bank looks at historical rates of robberies and sees that none have occurred recently. Therefore, it should be safe to stop paying for security guards. However, what will happen now? We are now in a different state of the world. Before, we were living in a world with security guards in a bank. Now, we have shifted to a world without bank security. So, sneaky criminals will have realized that the bank is now unguarded and vulnerable, and decide to actually carry out a robbery after all. We are in a new world, and robberies may come back. The historical data is therefore no longer informative of what will happen. All these adages should remind us about the complexity and interconnectedness of even the simplest of systems, and how careful we need to be when introducing new policy that may have unintended consequences. We're Micro Insights. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please subscribe to our channel.